Welcome, folks. Glad to see everyone out here on a fabulous spring day. I'm Terry Bradshaw, the chair of the Department of Agriculture, Landscape, and Environment, located right over here in Jeffords Hall. I had a little slot on here. I think it's just a sentence that says I'm kind of introducing this notion, but as I was driving around, I got to thinking about how I wanted to frame this. And I thought about the first time I heard the word agroecology. And I don't know if Ernesto has even heard this story. In 1995, I was a college sophomore, maybe junior, and I was a TA, RA, for a high school camp that was on campus here, our camp of high schoolers, the UVM Agroecology Summer Institute. And I never thought about that word. I was just a 21-year-old making sure that these high schoolers were learning and not getting into too much trouble. And some of them got into a little bit of trouble. And great, did my thing. They learned a lot about what we called at that time sustainable agriculture was the terminology we used. And I never thought about that portmanteau of agriculture and ecology, but it made sense to me. It wasn't a term that I had to really think about much. And then we fast forward a few years. I'm staff in then the Department of Plant and Soil Science, and we had a new chair who was reinvigorating the department, and we realized that we had a real link between our department and the Environmental Studies Department, and we decided to hire a faculty member who had a joint appointment who could bridge that gap. And that person became Ernesto Méndez, who came to the department and had that joint appointment and brought this field of agroecology with him. To me, that was still an ecological way of performing agriculture. But I hadn't really gotten into his side of things. I was still doing my staff work for the professor I worked for. And then 4 or 5 years, maybe it was 3 or 4 years after that, I became a graduate student. And the first class I took was what's now called Advanced Agroecology, was the Agroecology short course. And that's where I learned about the science, practice, and movement of agroecology, and how this was a much broader field than just ecological ways to do agriculture. And so I started to, I don't know if I learned to speak the language, but I learned the glossary, and I learned a lot of the concepts around that. Fast forward a few more years, Ernesto was our chair for a few years back, maybe 5 years ago, something like that. And we were sort of realigning ourselves as a department, and particularly as our undergraduate program, which then was called Ecological Agriculture. And Ernesto and others were making the point, we'd kind of been lapped. We were not using the terminology and marketing ourselves in a way that other people would understand, because we do agriculture different at UVM, and we weren't selling ourselves right. And so we made the intentional choice to change our major name at the time, really not much else. The program was largely the same, but we became a Bachelor of Science in Agroecology. And I think we sort of carried that, when you carry that name as you go into class, when you explain to people, when you talk to students who are agroecology majors, to a point I'm going to get to in a minute, when you market that, you learn to sell the program a little bit differently than we do agriculture, but a little bit different. So now today, I'm the department chair. I do the admitted student visit days for most all of the semester. I'm constantly meeting with new prospective students, and I often ask a 17-year-old, hey, have you ever heard the word agroecology? And half of them have, which surprised me at first when this popped up. And of the half that have, about half of them heard it because they were looking for some kind of agriculture environment, kind of doing a Google search, and they found us, and they found the word through that. But I would say a good quarter, and this is dozens of students a year, knew the term and sought us out because of that. And that's really cool. And so when I meet with these students and am kind of doing the sell and convincing them that UVM might be the place for them, oftentimes these students have this interest, and they're coming to us because of this science, practice, and movement that they know and that they want to be a part of. So This extension of the master's in agroecology is, I think, a natural progression. I think it's a necessary progression, and it's a really cool opportunity, especially for, I suspect that there's a good number of people in this room who will be the first cohort who will join this and follow this journey for the next year or two. It might be a year if you join the accelerated masters. And it's just really exciting to be part of this and to kind of take this next logical step to extend what we've been doing in the educational space in that world. So with that said, I want to welcome the panel. I want to welcome everyone here. Thank you for coming. This should be really exciting, and I'm looking forward to this to continue. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Terry. Hi, everybody. Welcome to those who are in person and to all of you online, with folks streaming in and viewing in from all over the world at this point. We're really excited to have you here for agroecology at UVM, Cultivating a Thriving Planet Through Knowledge and Action. We have a really good panel set up for you today, but before I get to them, if you cannot tell by my position between these two plants, I am your host for the evening. My name is Shane Rogers. I am the Outreach and Narrative Lead at the Institute for Agroecology, and I'm really excited to be here with Ernesto Méndez, Michelle Nikfarjam, tanamá varas, and Oliver Oliveros, who is joining us online. So before we jump into the questions, I want to introduce our folks a little bit more. Ernesto, over here directly to my left, is a professor of agroecology and environmental studies at UVM, and his research and teaching focus on agroecology and smallholder coffee systems and participatory action research and transdisciplinary research approaches has spanned over 30 years. And that 30 years of experience of working in agroecology has had him working in Latin America, North America, Europe, and Africa. Originally from El Salvador, he maintains deep connections with his Latin American roots, including serving as the vice president of the board of directors for the Latin American Scientific Society for Agroecology since 2022. So Ernesto, we're so excited to have you here. Oliver, who again is beaming in. Thank you for joining us, Oliver. I'm not looking at you, obviously. He is our executive coordinator for the Agroecology Coalition. And prior to his current role, Oliver was the interim executive director of the Global Alliance for the Future of Food, and which is a coalition of philanthropic foundations working to shift food and agriculture systems towards greater sustainability, security, and equity. He's also a stakeholder engagement lead at the UN Food Systems Summit, curating a network of food system champions. And we also have Michelle Nikfarjam, who is a PhD candidate in food systems at the University of Vermont with a graduate certificate in agroecology. And their research examines equitable agroforestry transitions in the Northeast through the lens of agroecology, participatory research, and food justice. And her work across the food system spans 10 years and has included roles as a researcher, an educator, a technical assistance provider, food and nutrition policy analyst, as well as in organic production, agriculture, and urban farm management. And finally, we have tanamá varas, who is the Catamount Farm Manager at UVM, as well as a coordinator for La Via Campesina North America. Tanamá is a Jabaro, an educator, and an abolitionist, and they work with farmers globally towards a food sovereign future in Vermont and beyond. So, without further ado, we're gonna jump into some questions for these amazing panelists. And Ernesto, I'm gonna start off with you. You have been working as an agroecologist for years. And for those who may not be familiar with the concept, can you just ground us initially in what agroecology is and why it's important, especially right now?
Thank you so much, Shane. Yeah, agroecology, a definition of agroecology is not easy to come up with because it is a complex approach, but that's what I consider it most than anything, is a way of doing things. And for me, the reason that it's so relevant right now is because we have a pretty broken food system, and agroecology is a way to try to transform it to a food system that's going to be more sustainable and more equitable. So a couple of things about the approach in this field that I consider important. One is that agroecology values different types of knowledge. So this includes Western science, but also indigenous knowledge and the practical knowledge of farmers and other actors in the food system. So what we try to do, our aspiration, I would say, in the IFA and for other agroecologists, is to weave these knowledges together, to guide this transformation to a better food system, valuing, working horizontally with different people, different types of knowledges. And we also use principles, so ecological, social, political principles to guide our work. And the last thing that I will say about it is how we do it. So we have a very intentional approach on how we do our work. And this ties back to one of our pillars. We have 3 pillars that we work with. One of them is co-creation of knowledge. And what that means is that we do research through a co-creative process with our partners who can be farmers, organizations, any other people that we're working with. And we're trying to value their knowledge and value their needs in the work that we do. We also try to weave this work into our learning programs, our narrative programs, our convenings, always working with people and trying to co-create. In terms of research, and I will end with this, I like to say that we do research with people for people.
Thank you so much, Ernesto, for that grounding. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Oliver. You are beaming in from not the United States at this point. I would actually love... Sorry?
I'm beaming in from Rome, yeah.
From Rome. Okay, lovely. And through the Agroecology Coalition, you work with dozens of different entities. Can you tell us a bit about where agroecology is happening around the world and among whom it is happening?
Thanks very much, and lovely opportunity to be with you all, virtually at least. So the Agroecology Coalition was set up in 2021 to provide a mechanism for countries and organizations to collaborate on food systems transformation through agroecology as a pathway. So let me mention this again. So the work of the coalition is really about transforming our broken food system, as Ernesto mentioned, with agroecology as a pathway to get there. So our work is guided by the principles and elements of agroecology as defined by the high-level panel of experts of the World Food Security, but also by FAO's council. So the reason why I'm mentioning this, it's because the principles of agroecology were elaborated, defined, and debated upon within the framework of that CFS, where both state, government, and non-state actors actively engage on global food security and food sovereignty issues. Meanwhile, the elements of agroecology have undergone several iterations at the regional level and was agreed upon by 197 member states of FAO. It is important to mention it for me because I want to get-go, we are anchoring the work of the coalition both from civil society, indigenous peoples, farmers organizations, or non-state actors in general on one hand, but also from government actors as well. So this is a way of saying that agroecology is recognized both by governments and non-state actors. So that means agroecology is happening across the board. And the reason why I'm saying that is because there was a moment where agroecology was seen as a niche that is championed by civil society groups, by smallholder farmers movements, and the academia. But today, it is entering the political mainstream and the international arena. At the global level, for example, look at the 3 Rio Conventions. In 2014, the CBD, the Biodiversity Convention, COP, mentioned agroecology for the first time in its decision text. And then in 2019, COP14 on the desertification mentioned agroecology in its 2 formal decisions until recently, Decision 16 and the Global Land Outlook. In 2022 and 2023, although no formal decision under the UNFCCC, the International Panel on Climate Change in its assessment report mentioned agroecology as effective option for mitigation and adaptation to climate change. And then as of March 2026, at least 13 countries have adopted national agroecology strategies or framework from Benin to Bolivia to Laos to Uruguay, but also a number of subnational administrations in Switzerland, Murunga County in Kenya, Sicily, and everything in between have their local versions of agroecology strategies. At the supranational level, we've also noted that recent regional developments promoting agroecology within the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, for instance, they come up with an ASEAN-wide policy guidelines on agroecological transition. The Eastern African Community, thanks to the Eastern African Legislative Assembly motion on agroecology, and also the Parlatino, the Latin American and Caribbean network, came up with a model law on agroecology promotion. All these strategies and laws have been adopted since 2011. So these does not include the thousands of grassroots movements, community-based organizations, NGOs, and others who are actively implementing agroecology on the ground, from the Americas to Asia to Africa and to Europe. So this acceleration marks a significant shift in the global food systems landscape. So it signals a growing political recognition of agroecology as a strategic pathway towards more resilient and sustainable and equitable system. And this reflects that a broader international momentum towards agroecology.
Wow. Excuse me. Thank you so much. I feel like we should just stop there and everybody should go ahead and apply to the masters because Oliver just made such a convincing argument about why and how agroecology is growing. So Michelle, Oliver named how agroecology is really starting to gain a lot of ground politically, but that is driven by the on the ground and the practical application that folks are actually doing to push these agroecology principles and to make sure that our communities are also embracing them and aren't getting left behind. So you're finishing up your PhD in food systems. You work with indigenous communities in southern New England around food forests, and you're also a community organizer in your own right. So given all that you're doing and more, what do you think it looks like to practice agroecology? And what impact do you see that practice having in the world at large and also the world that you are interacting with on a day-to-day?
Thanks, Sean. Oops, there we go. Thanks, Shane. Yeah, it's going to be really hard to follow Oliver, but I will try. So as Shane said, my name is Michelle. I'm a PhD student in my 5th year. Don't ever ask a PhD student what year they're in or when they're finishing, just a piece of advice. And I also work part-time for a tribally run land trust called the Pecasset-Pokanoket Land Trust. And in addition to that, this semester I'm instructing the Intro to Agroecology course. So I'll kind of talk through all 3 of those things and what they look like in practice for me. But first, a quick story. So I was at an event that had nothing to do with school or work. It was a meditation retreat. I don't know if that kind of feeds into the trope that agroecologists are hippies, but that's okay. And I met someone who's also a graduate student, and for the other graduate students in the room, we often do this dance. Oh, what's your PhD in? What's your dissertation on? And again, we don't ask each other when we're finishing. But we started, talking, and this other graduate student was like, oh, I work in southern New England. I work with culturally meaningful plants for indigenous people. And we kept going down and down these kind of levels of our work. And the next thing I asked is like, oh, who do you work with? Like, who is your community partner? And the student kind of gave me a look of like, what are you talking about? Like, community partner, like I'm a researcher. And this student worked with like a national land trust for their work, but I feel like you kind of don't really, at least for me, like I don't always realize how kind of good I've had it being trained in agroecology. As Ernesto said, it's really participatory action research is really emphasized. Research for people, by people, is that what you said? With people. For people, with people. And so that's, for me, whether it is a research project or a program, that's always the starting point for me. Who is affected by the issues that I'm researching? Who is going to be potentially benefited by my research, right? And so starting at the community level and really trying to understand what is needed in an ecological sense, social sense. So it's like this, it's a really well-rounded way of looking at things, and I often forget that this lens, like I've been trained to look at the world through this lens, and you know, I'm around amazing other graduate students and professors who have also been trained this way. And so I think, yeah, in practice with any project, especially research, it's really starting with people. And then in a teaching sense, I'm teaching the Intro to Agroecology course, and I've had to revisit a lot of concepts like what does phosphorus do, and how does phosphorus move through the soil, and how is that different from nitrogen? I studied sustainable agriculture for my bachelor's, which is very similar to the agroecology bachelor's here. So I've had to rack my brain. And I also took advanced ecological foundations course, which is part of the master's. I took it as a PhD student, and it was really helpful to have that scientific background. I see it, you know, play out in a lot of ways, but especially in teaching. If I had to, you know, start from nowhere, it would be really difficult. But I have this foundation to come back to, and this grounding in a lot of different scientific disciplines that affect ecosystems and affect agriculture. So in studying agroecology, I have studied ecology, agronomy, the social sciences. And so I really feel like it is a good example of what interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary studies can do for one as a teacher. And then also, as like a practitioner, my research and my practice and my job are a little bit muddled, and it's sometimes hard to tell where one starts and one ends. But speaking to like the scientific foundation, having to kind of revisit all of it for my teaching, I was giving a workshop last weekend at a project, like a food forest project, as Shane was talking about when he introduced me, and I was getting so excited. You know, I was so excited to tell people about all these interactions happening in the soil, like the layers of the food forest, and just being able to be well versed in that has been, yeah, super helpful in a teaching sense. And then, you know, a lot of the people that I interact with at that project and just in general. This food forest project's in Grafton, Massachusetts, which is kind of between Providence, Worcester, and Boston. And so there's a lot of communities that come from those areas that come to that community farm, right? And are from underrepresented backgrounds in agriculture science and ecology. And so another thing that agroecology has really helped me to do is value all different types of knowledge, and also understand how to bring things to people in a way that's meaningful to them and that they can understand and engage with. So probably the way that I'm teaching my students about soil science is really different than how I do that in a community setting. But I feel like I've really been able to, yeah, learn from others who also work with community groups and also teach. And yeah, I think that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Michelle. So Tanamá, we just heard from Michelle about all the different integration of agroecology through teaching, through some community organizing, and you and yourself, you're organizing with La Via Campesina, you're studying as well, and you're farming. You're the farm manager for Catamount Farm. You're in your second year of your own farm. So same question to you. What do you think it looks like to practice agroecology, and what impact do you see it having on the world that you're interacting with directly and the world at large?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Shane. So as Shane mentioned, yeah, I'm in a lot of different spaces, all trying to be grounded in what farmers and peasants go through on a daily basis. We're not all going to be farmers, and we need everybody participating in our food system. And so for me, agroecology and a lot of the communities I work with, agroecology is a way of life. It's a way of being with the land. And so that practice is a daily practice, both on the farm and off the farm. And so what that looks like is contemplation, spending quiet time on the land, understanding how we engage with the land, how we engage with people, with our community, and the perspective of agroecology within a larger global context is the connection and community, right? So the solidarity, when I work with farmers, globally, we're all under the same struggles. So we're struggling to get land access, we're struggling with markets, we're struggling with rising costs, right? But I think the beauty of agroecology is we're building the resilience within those systems. And so right now there's a lot of industrial agriculture that is struggling with fertilizers, right? They're struggling with these things that are being controlled at a global level. And so agroecology principles mitigate that. And so you're able to get your nutrients, your fertilizers from a holistic system that you're implementing, right? And so if you come to Catamount Farm, right, here at UVM, you'll see a lot of these principles in place, not only the ecological principles, but the social principles as well, right? So it's all community-based, and I think that's the biggest and most important component, is that we're connected to a system that's about solidarity, that's about sharing knowledge, right? So a lot of the work we do in Vermont is with Rural Vermont, and Rural Vermont is a farmer-based organization, and through that is farmer-to-farmer exchanges. And so we're putting the farmer's experience within, on their land, in their context of practicing agroecology, and putting them in the position of sharing that knowledge. So then when the farmers can partner with organizations like the Institute for Agroecology to leverage the research to try things, that's where, right, the participatory action research comes in, the close collaboration with farmers, and the movement piece of showing up in solidarity with one another. And so for me, that's all about the practice of agroecology. And that's where we need to head to. More collaborations, less competition. How do we collaborate on sharing funding? And so I think the launch of this program is really exciting because for me, I studied sustainable agriculture and food systems at a big land-grant university in California. And so agroecology is taught there, but I looked for more. You know, at that time I was looking for more. I was looking for more opportunities. And so I think this is a great opportunity for folks globally to stay connected. You'll have people from all over the world in this program, and I think that's important to see different perspectives based on where you are, right? And as agroecology continues to gain popularity, we'll see how it continues to build resilience against climate change, right? As we saw in 2016 with Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, a lot of farmers who were practicing agroecology were able to continue to harvest where industrial monoculture farms were not. And so that's what that looks like to me in practice.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's really lovely to hear, you know, Ernesto, you grounded us in what the theory was behind agroecology and some of the principles, and then we heard from Oliver, Michelle, and tanamá, who all showed us the different layers that go into it, right? And it's based on this idea that we have to trust that others are also adhering to those values and those principles, and they're all working and we're all working towards this system. So the Institute for Agroecology here at UVM is one of the only of its kind at a land-grant university. And I'm hoping that you can tell us a little bit more about what is happening around agroecology at UVM, including sharing a bit about the new master's program that got launched, and talk a little bit about why this part of education and continuing to train the next generation is an important part of agroecology and what we are looking for building in the future.
Thank you, Shane. Yeah, and Terry started it with a little bit of history, and I think it's important to recognize and have gratitude for the people that started this way back when. And I go back to Fred Magdoff, who was a professor here in plant and soil science, soil health specialist, but also working in agroecology, and also had a very strong political side to him, and edited, what was it called, edited a Marxist magazine, and I knew him because of his soil science work. But he was here in the plant and soil science department, and as Terry mentioned, Deb Neer, who was chair and hired me, is also someone who's worked in agroecology. A lot of people in extension here at UVM do agroecology. Some of them don't call it that, but they're actually doing it, in my view. So there's a history here that is very rich. So at the Institute for Agroecology, we do research, we do education, we do convenings, we do narrative work that you lead. We do other things, and the idea is that we try to bring all of these together to support every program. So when we think about the education, we're really trying to connect students to some of the research projects that we're doing all over the world. As you mentioned in my biography, that I do work in Latin America, Africa, Europe. Those are places where IFA people are doing work too. And we're trying to bring all that knowledge that people are generating to our educational programs. Like Terry mentioned, there is a bachelor's degree in agroecology. We used to do these courses. I was lucky enough to have a graduate mentor who got me involved in doing these 2-week intensive courses in agroecology. They were international. Starting in California in 1999, I was part of those. And when I came to UVM, we started doing them here too. And that's one of the course that Terry took. And from those courses, we had the idea of doing the graduate certificate. So the graduate certificate is a 5-course certificate that people can take, and it's accredited by UVM. And it's an option that was done online because we were thinking about professionals. So how can someone who is already doing agricultural work, doing natural resources work, and has this interest can deepen their knowledge online without having to leave their jobs or their geography. So the certificate started around 2018, and it's been very successful. We've also have people that take courses standalone for non-credit and bring a diversity of people into that classroom that has been very rich for learning. I think a lot of people have said that. We were also hearing from people that a certificate, especially international folks, wasn't really something that helped them that much in their places. So why don't you guys do a master? Why aren't you doing a master's degree? And of course the answer is because we're so busy. But you know, the seed was planted, and we really waited for the right moment. And I'm so excited that it is happening right now. And I do want to say, and this is a pitch for some in the audience, maybe tanamá, am I hearing? You might be in the first cohort of the masters. But there are 4 different pathways that we're hoping to have. Or I should say there are 4 different pathways for graduate education in agroecology right now. One, you can do a micro certificate, which is 3 courses. The full certificate is 5 courses. The master's online, which is 10 courses, 30 credits over 2 years usually. But there's also, for the UVM people, there's also an accelerated master's option, which allows UVM students to take the first year during their senior year, and then they only have to take 1 more year. And because it is online, if you get a job, I'm looking at Sam, who I brought from my other class. If you get a job in Boston, you could finish in Boston doing your job there. So there's a lot of advantages to this modality. So I think that, yeah, it's really exciting. I heard Terry's talk the other day about when's the PhD coming. We're gonna wait and see how the master's goes. But it's exciting to have this. And as you said, it is the first Institute for Agroecology in a land grant. There are other centers, to be fair, around agroecology in other universities around the US, but not in a land grant. So we are the first one in a land grant. Thank you, Shane.
Thanks, Ernesto. And if everyone in the audience looks under their seat, there's an application to the master's program for you to fill out before you leave. I was just kidding. Ernesto, I'm actually going to come back to you real quick because you did a really good job at describing all the different things that are happening around agroecology at UVM. And I'm curious from your perspective and the years that you've spent helping to build up this program with many partners, where do students go with their education in agroecology from UVM? I mean, you have 2 wonderful examples sitting right next to you, but like, where have you seen it and what is it that folks are able to take from this type of education?
You know, that is one question that I was asking myself before proposing to the Plant and Soil Science Department to change the name of the major, because our major was ecological agriculture. And of course, everybody knew I was an agroecologist, and I didn't want it to seem like I just want to do this because this is my field, right? So I did some research, and I think the difference between a more agricultural focused major that is more narrow, we could say more into only the technical part of agriculture, versus one that gives you some social science, that talks about issues of equity in the entire food system, is that your options when you come out are a lot broader. So a lot of people go into nonprofit work. A lot of the alums of the certificate seem to be working in urban agriculture in one way or another. A few of them are doing farming, but I would say not a lot. Many others go into grad school. They use it as a launch to do another graduate program. So I think it gives you a suite of options that you can decide on. And one of the things that we do in our class is, because we get students, I'm teaching the graduate course in ecological foundations of agroecology, and we have people from the food systems major that are more social scientists. We have some people with an ecology background. So we have to teach it in a way that everybody can participate and learn. So we do this dig deeper. If you're an ecologist already, then I'm going to give you some more complex readings. But I think that that foundation that people are taking allows you to choose all these different pathways. Yeah, thank you.
All right, thanks. And I know I just threw that question in, so wonderful, wonderful ad-libbing on that. And I really like that you connected it back to something that Tanamá said too about building that type of solidarity, because these are folks from all over the world that are interacting with this program here at UVM and other programs as well. So Oliver, I'm going to turn to you. Speaking of all over the world, you work with folks from all over the world, and you see how agroecology is showing up in many different contexts, as you laid out in your earlier response. So why do you think it's important that something like the UVM Institute for Agroecology and the Masters in Agroecology at UVM exists, especially in a place like the United States? And what role does it have to play within this global context that you are consistently working in?
Yeah, I think it's really important for that something like the UVM Institute for Agroecology and the Masters in Agroecology at UVM exist in your part of the world. As I mentioned earlier, several countries, governments that is, are coming up with their national agroecology strategies. None of that so far is from North America. Despite the many community-driven initiatives on agroecology, food sovereignty, and other farmer-centric approaches in your part of the world, we don't see, as of yet, public policy and institutional backing on agroecology in the US. So we are aware, I'm particularly aware, that a national policy or strategy on agroecology is important, but it is also not a sufficient condition to institutionalize agroecology. But it is, to a certain extent, the story of agroecology itself, right, as a social movement. Nonetheless, we see this as a sort of like a recognition of the value and the potential that agroecology brings. I also see this as a mechanism to also hold public office accountable to ensuring and promoting sustainable approaches to farming and to food systems transformation in general. So having a formal degree program on agroecology offered in accredible universities and institutions like UVM is another form of recognition that agroecology is a valid science. Yes, you can be a hippie, but you can also be a scientist at the same time, because this type of approach pulls together and makes use of different disciplines and knowledge systems which are essentially important in shaping the next generation of agriculture or food systems professional. There are also other universities across the world who are putting up their other agroecology programs. So having one at UVM, for example, allows us well to connect with these different universities and co-create an agroecology program that is sort of like transatlantic or, sort of like interregional, that takes into account specificities of different contexts, because agroecology, after all, is context specific. And it allows to compare and contrast and really take stock of what could really be transformative when you talk about and design agroecology syllabi, right? And from what I also understand, from what Ernesto said, that the program offers a flexible pathways, right? Full-time, part-time, accelerated enrollment options. So this can attract early to mid-career professionals, farmers, educators, organizers, to deepen their impact without leaving their communities, as he said. So what does it mean? It is also it is already challenging to keep young people into farming, let alone attract them to agriculture as a viable career option. So a program like this, which is flexible, transformative, and fully grounded both on theory and practice, makes it an appealing proposition for the next generation. And if we look back at my first point on institutionalization, UVM as an entity for higher education or higher learning, it contributes to building that next cadre of agriculture and agroecology professionals trained with both the soft skills and the hard skills to fully grasp the complexities of our current food systems. So if we imagine the potential trajectory of students, it is not impossible, I hope, that some will end up also in the realm of policy and politics, and therefore push for institutionalization of agroecology within the public sector in the US. And this is particularly true in the context of current crisis, both natural and man-made. So agroecology means really growing and providing, nutritious, diverse foods and feeding communities in a way that ensures fairness, strengthens resilience, and sustains the planet. So more than a farming method, it is actually like a global movement, as we have already heard, for food systems that are fair, local, democratic, and rooted in care. So in all these, and in face of all these, rising hunger, destruction of biodiversity, and agroecology offers a real path forward, tackling these challenges together by working with nature, building resilience, and supporting communities. And I do really think that you all have the comparative advantage and competitive edge to offer a really credible program on agroecology, not only to the people in your part of the world, but also for those who are interested to join the program online. Over.
Michelle, I'm so sorry you have to follow Oliver every time. And as a side note, one of our targeted audiences is hippie scientists, so I'm glad that you were able to put some words to that. So, Michelle.
The hippie scientist.
The hippie scientist. You just heard from Ernesto about what is happening around agroecology at the UVM and where we can go, where folks can go from that type of education. We just heard from Oliver about why an institution like this is so important in the global context. And you, in particular, are in the program. You're part of the institute. You're moving through the agroecology community day to day. What has your experience been like? And for you, what are also the possibilities for yourself, for tanamá, and for others that are going through similar types of programs and this program at UVM specifically?
Yeah, thanks, Shane. I remember my first week here, I think it was Vic Izzo, who's a professor in plant and soil science and environmental, or I guess agriculture, landscape, and environment now, had an info session about the graduate certificate, and I went, but that's kind of why I came here. I was like, there's no promotion needed. This is the reason that I came to UVM. And I didn't really know just how much it would open things up for me. I studied plant and soil science in my bachelor's, and there was really two pathways. I saw a lot of people go into production farming, but it was people that had family farms or had another way to access land. And in New England in particular, land is one of the most expensive in the country, so that didn't feel like a viable pathway. And then another path was research, but the kind of research I was exposed to in undergrad. Just for an example, my professor did his whole dissertation on one flower, which I think is very, very important. And I just was always kind of questioning, thinking about systems change. And so that's what really brought me to this program. I was attracted to it for that very reason. And being a part of the community has been really, really impactful for me. I am a part of the lab, or it used to be the ALC. Now we're the Institute for Ecology, and then within that, all the graduate students and professors convene weekly around these lightly kind of facilitated sessions where we can bring questions that we have with our research. There's a a group that is working through different types of research methods that meets regularly. Colin has done sessions on co-authorship in publications. So really everything you can imagine we address in the lab, and it's very much co-created. I was a part of the COCO, the coordinating committee, when it was the ALC, and we really had a lot of autonomy to bring people, guest speakers that we wanted to have, really like co-construct the space together. And that's been really impactful for me because everyone that comes to that space is from a really different background academically, but also people work from all around the world. And so I've got to learn about things happening in a lot of different places through different lenses. There are people that are anthropologists or sociologists. There's also entomologists. And so just being able to learn from graduate students and professors in this setting that's, you really get to know people that way. And I think the other thing that's been really impactful is just the kind of networks that have opened up for me. So Oliver was talking about the Convention on Biological Diversity. I was there. I was there when they approved the word agroecology in that text, and I, as an undergrad, I was interested in like larger political processes, but if you go to a UN website and try to figure out how to attend the COP or the CBD, you go nowhere. And so a lot of opportunities just by the way, like people are connected to a lot of these processes and policymaking has, really allowed me to engage with a lot of different types of groups and a lot of different types of people. And I think, and the other thing about the online classes is that I did the graduate certificate, like I said, and there are people from all around the world. So it's like, in addition to the lab, the classes themselves, you're learning with people from different countries, they're bringing their experiences, and I've found that really meaningful. So yeah, it's been great.
Thank you, Michelle. Really insightful. And I also really enjoy part of the IFA is that most of the people you meet are bringing their whole selves here, right? They're not just the flower that they study, but they are thinking about the whole system as well. So Tanamá, I'm going to ask the same question to you because you come with a slightly different perspective. Tending, farming, and doing study as well. So how has UVM's focus on agroecology supported you in your work? And also, where do you imagine and see going from here with that type of education that's available?
Yeah, thanks, Shane. So I'm entering my 4th season here at UVM on the farm. And when I initially applied for this job, one of the things that I felt confident about was that there were faculty like Ernesto, that there was an agroecology program, because I studied, like I mentioned, sustainable agriculture and food systems with an agroecology focus. I worked a lot with Miguel Attieri in Berkeley, and so I had this, high expectation of what agroecology is, what it's supposed to be, and my experiences internationally as well. And so when I moved back to New England and saw this job opening, I knew that I would be able to work with them in order to create a student farm that was agroecological, that was student-centered, that was supporting the next generation. And so I think UVM continues to offer that and then some. And that was, one of the most important things for me in coming into my role now. And so I think it's only gotten stronger. The online courses that was invited as a speaker before I was even in Vermont, to then participating in some of them are dynamic. I think I've been in a number of online courses before that are hard and slow and struggle to be present, where the IFA team does a great job of making it engaging and connecting and inviting. As Michelle mentioned, the network is so large and so vast, and so as soon as you're, in this community and in this program, you're automatically connected to a vast network of people globally, right? Wherever you are, if you're traveling to England, if you're traveling to California, to Mexico, or wherever, there's probably someone there connected to the IFA, right? I've been to a number of conferences around the United States, And when I mentioned Vermont, they're like, Vermont has a lot going on. There's, like, there's always something happening for such a small state, low population. There's a tight-knit community. There is cutting edge research, right? UVM just became an R1 recently, and I think that continues to reflect what UVM has to offer, what the Institute for Agroecology has to offer. And really, there's not that many programs that have connections with the social movements, right, of like the foundation of what has popularized agroecology globally, right? La Via Campesina is one of the largest social movements in the world with 200 million plus people, farmers, peasants, indigenous people, pastoralists, hunter and gatherers that are part of this movement. And so to have those kinds of connections, not something you're gonna get really anywhere else. And to have genuine connections, right? Research that's done with folks and by folks and for folks there is something, that is just very unique about this place. And so getting all of that from afar and then having those connections if you're ever able to be in Vermont as well. So to me, I think that's a lot of what UVM has to offer in addition to this program, the Institute for Agroecology.
That's what I was going to say. I'm thinking back to the global forum we had, and I think people from 50 different countries came, and we spent the week learning together, and some of those connections I still have today, and it is really rare that you're in an academic program that connects you to social movements and things happening on the ground in such like a direct way. So all these people were brought here through the Institute, and it was a really great way to connect with people, yeah.
Thanks, Michelle and tanamá. Ernesto, I'm going to throw it to you. I'm going to put my narrative hat on real quick, though, and say one of the things that I love hearing from all of this, too, is just how much folks are interacting with the idea of agroecology in so many different contexts. It's in the classroom, it's on the farm, it's in the community, it's when you travel abroad, and I think that's a really unique part of this that's very exciting. So I know you wanted to add some more thoughts.
I actually wanted to go back to a little bit of gratitude because, as you can see, so many of the remarks around agroecology were about working together, collaborating, collective movements. So I just wanted to give a few thanks to end. One is that before the IFA, we had a community practice called the Agroecology and Livelihoods Collaborative that I co-directed with Martha Caswell, who is in here. But that was really the precursor. It was around for about a decade before and established a foundation to what became the Institute. So gratitude to all those people that helped with that. I also wanted to mention Colin Anderson, who's the co-director of the IFA with me. And we shared the fun and the woes of running an institute at UVM. And then I want to thank a few other people. So the master's program and the certificate program are a collaboration. They're a partnership between the Department of Agriculture, Landscape, and Environment, and also the College of Agriculture. So a few thanks, and I'm gonna get the audience to move a little bit here. So first of all, I wanna thank everyone who's staff or affiliated in one way or another to the Institute for Agroecology. Can you please stand up? Yeah? Come on. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You didn't stand up, Shane. Or you. Now, how about anybody who's part of ALE? Can you please stand up? Some people get to stand up twice. And who's a part of CALS, the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences? Yeah. And lastly, I think there's only one person from the UVM Foundation. But, what's that? Graduate College, Chris Berger, yes. Yeah, so all of these people, we all support each other in doing all of this work. So I'm very grateful to everyone for everything that you do. And it's so exciting to do this launch. And to now, we need to get excited about all the work that it's going to take to do a really good program. Thank you so much for coming, everybody. And Oliver, thanks so much for joining us from Rome.
Okay. Yes. Thank you. And we still have some time for question and answer. So Ernesto's like, I'm done. I'm out of here. I told you my piece. So with that said, our folks online, if you didn't see all the people standing in the room, we hope you were standing too if you were part of those. So thank you for that. But is there anybody in the room, or Amanda, Emily, is there any questions online that we might be able to ask of our panel? Or anybody else in the room that might? None right now? What's coming in online?
Somebody asked, how are the online classes designed to be engaging for students? What opportunities are there for an out-of-state online grad student to connect with this community of practice in person?
I think that's for you, Ernesto.
Thank you for the question. So we put a lot of thought about how to make online teaching and learning engaging. One of the things that we do is that our courses are synchronous. So you meet with everyone for 2 hours in 1 week. So you have that interaction. There's usually a lecture, there's breakout groups, and then there's a lot of material online. That lecture gets recorded for people that can't make it, but that is a really good place for interacting. We also have been testing, exploring, doing a hybrid model where the people that are here at UVM are coming in person, and then there's an online community. And there's been a lot of work put into it. Colin tested it last semester with his class, and also our introductory class by Martha Caswell. I'm testing it right now with Ecological Foundations, and it actually works really well. And going back to some of the things that Michelle and Tanamá said, it's great for the people in the room to interact with each other, but also if we didn't have the online audience, they can connect with, right now we have people from Ghana, from South Africa, from Chile, from Poland, but working for the FAO in Rome. So all of these people are coming in and learning together, and I think that the students in person really appreciate that. So we always talk to the students and say and explain why we're doing it. It's access for those that can't make it in person, access for those people that maybe cannot get the graduate credit, but they're coming in as non-credit, which is cheaper in terms of payment. So yeah, there's a lot of ways that we try to engage, and with this new masters, we're gonna try to get more creative to make it as engaging as we can.
Thanks, Ernesto. And I'm pretty sure there are so many people in the audience right now that would be more than willing to put someone up if you so found yourself in Vermont for a weekend or for a visit as well. Are there any other questions coming in? Yeah, Eric, I'll give you this.
Thank you. I was just thinking about the comment that folks were saying that their certificate program wasn't necessarily helping them in specific ways that they might be wanted to, and therefore a master's program would be good to create because it would. And so it may be an obvious question, but what are some of the ways that some of these folks around the world would be more specifically helped by having this master's program?
Thanks. Ernesto, I'll throw it to you. And also, I'm curious what Oliver might think, and Michelle and Tanamá.
Yeah, I can tell you that it depends on where you go. Like if we go to Latin America, there is an equivalent to the certificate in Spanish, diplomado. So for people in those countries where it's recognized, then the certificate could work. But I was hearing from a lot of people in Africa saying there's no recognition for something like a certificate. So for me, getting a certificate would give me the knowledge, which is great, but my institution, and I was talking to a lot of university professors that are trying to start agroecology programs, my institution wouldn't recognize a certificate. I would need like a master's degree to have more legitimacy, that you deepen your knowledge in agroecology. And a lot of people interested, right, to get it from a US university, a land-grant university with a reputation. So that's what I was hearing. I haven't heard it as much from people in the U.S. because I think in the U.S. certificates are now better recognized. But definitely for people in Africa is what I was hearing. And then not every country in Latin America accepts the diplomados or the certificates. I don't know about Brazil. No? So? Yeah. Yeah. And what Victoria said, that they have certificates that are like 2 hours online. That's part of the problem, right? You can have a certificate like ours that is 5 courses. So, about a year of work, and then you can have one that was 5 weeks. So for people that are weighing in if this is a good enough credential, gets a little bit confusing, whereas a master's is pretty anchored as a credential. Yeah.
Michelle, did you have any thoughts as a certificate holder?
Well, I like to think of a graduate certificate kind of as like a grown-up minor, basically. I think it's been really helpful because my graduate degree is in food systems, and that means basically everything and anything you can think of. And so trying to, when I'm looking at jobs or looking, especially if I'm looking to the academic job market, I feel like having that extra thing. A graduate certificate can go really far in that sense because then they might ask you to teach a class on agroecology. Like my advisor has a certificate in women gender studies, and her first class that she taught was around that. And so I think, just to demonstrate that you have a specialization in something. And I've worked with a lot of undergrads through like advising, teaching, informal and formal, and I tell them that kind of unfortunately a master's is the new bachelor's these days. Anecdotally, that's the one reason that I kept pursuing graduate school is because I kept kind of hitting, I hit a wall with farming. I was like this, I loved farming, but it wasn't a viable career for me. At that point in my life, I hope to, be an old lady with a farm one day. And in the nonprofit space, I had someone that was 5 years older than me that also had a master's, and I kind of was observing her day to day as my boss, and I was like, you to work in an environmental or kind of social-oriented field, these days, I do feel like you kind of need a master's, unfortunately. Or fortunately, if you do the agroecology master's.
Fortunately. Oliver, I think you might have some thoughts on this too.
Yeah, no, I think part of the answer also depends on what the person sees as his or her own trajectory, right? If you see yourselves more staying in the academia, then obviously the choice is you have to do an MSc and then you follow it up with a PhD. But if your career plan and your career path and your trajectory that you see yourselves is working in the philanthropic sector or in a policy-based institution, and you already have a master's degree, for instance, outside of agroecology, but in a complementary field, be it tropical agriculture or social sciences or rural sociology, and you are interested to work on issues around food systems, food sovereignty, etc., that certificate would be, or a diploma, which is not necessarily not at the MSc level, can be a deal breaker, because it shows that on top of your own sort of like general specialization, you also have a sort of like a soft spot and a specific sort of like a ammunition on a specific area. And so I really, at least in Europe, that is also how people and organizations see it, like a certificate or a diploma is really an add-on to something that you are already offering. And with all being equal, that could be a deal breaker. Over.
And tanamá, anything to add? I think we covered it. I think we have maybe time for one more question, or well, we got a lot. I don't know what time it is, so why don't we go to someone in the audience? We'll do one online, and then we'll end with Gabby. So like 3 questions, just because I know we're pushing our time.
Hi, I was just wondering, with a program that's so rooted in community, how do you think that this master's is really going to impact the local Vermont community?
one of the aspirations that we have is that a lot of undergraduate students are going to take the AMP option, which that's the accelerated master's pathway, where I think I mentioned it before, but it's an undergraduate student during their senior year, they can take half of the master's, and then once they graduate, they only have to take one more year. So for people like that, I'm hoping that the interaction they can interact with some of the things that we're doing in the Institute regionally and locally. For the online people, the idea is actually to figure out a way how the master's project can be locally embedded. And this is not easy. We've been dealing with this for the certificate. So again, we need to work on supporting people. Emily Hoyler, who's over there, who's helping a lot with the masters and the thinking around the learning programs, has had this idea of maybe having, doing a cohort of people that are doing their master's project. And we keep a structure, it's like a class, but everyone's doing something hands-on, hopefully community-based, that we are supporting. So that's the best we can do when people are far away. But we also hope that there's going to be a lot of people here at UVM that can engage with the Vermont community. Mm-hmm.
Anybody wanted to add anything? Michelle?
Yeah, I'm not good at this mic thing. I'll add that a lot of master's and PhD students often will, because of agroecology being such a community-oriented discipline, as you said, often will focus kind of where they are. And so I've interacted with several grad students who have done their master's projects here in Vermont. So, yeah.
Amazing. And I will add, there are so many stories to tell, and there's so much weaving to take place between work that's happening in Vermont, work that's happening globally, work that's happening nationally. And that's all part of this, right? It is not just the focus on the education, but how are we lifting up these communities in solidarity with one another and really making sure that this is being seen as this holistic approach to changing the food system for the better. I'm going to go to Gabby in the back.
Thank you. I actually just answered my question, which was whether it's possible for students a way to engage locally for their master project. Because as Oliver was saying, agroecology is so contextualized, so it's important that we support communities locally, and then people can do something hands-on in their community. So it's already answered.
Very well said, though. So what I'm going to say is we're coming up on time. For folks that are online, we really appreciate you tuning in. We know that there are a bunch of questions in the chat. I believe our person, there's not a bunch of questions, never mind. If you have any questions, you can email ifa@uvm.edu. And we will make sure to get you a response. For the folks that are here, if you have questions, we have Ernesto, Michelle, Tanamá, we have Colin, we have Emily. There's so many people to ask your questions of. Oliver, we just want to say thank you so much for you tuning in and for your very eloquent responses. I'm going to pass it over to you four, though. Is there anything you want to conclude with? Ernesto, I'm going to let you go last. So I'm going to go Michelle, Tanamá, Oliver, and then Ernesto. Is there anything you want to add as we close it out?
Not at this time.
Thanks. Not too much, just that, when we think about agroecology, we also have to couple that with food sovereignty. And I think, again, this program and the Institute for Agroecology and UVM does a great job at that. And so, within La Via Campesina, folks often say that, agroecology without food sovereignty is just a technical fix, and food sovereignty without agroecology is just theory. So we need to have those two, and I think this program does a great job at that.
Very well said. Oliver, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, just to add that the messy context that we are in now with all the polycrisis, there is, and if we know that agroecology is about diversity, about nutrition, about, coming together, well, our response to this polycrisis can be a revolution that is as delicious as agroecology. So guys, what are you waiting for? Go ahead and make sure you apply for the program. Over to you guys.
We got to get Oliver on the payroll of those.
I was going to say, no, I don't have anything else to add. After that, thank you so much to everyone online and in person for coming.
Yeah, and Terry, thank you for introducing us in the back. Folks that are here, there's a lot of good cheese, there's some drinks, there's some people. Folks that are online, this is incentive to come to Vermont next time because there's cheese, there's drinks, and there's good people. Thank you all, and we'll talk soon.
Enjoy, everybody. Bye.